So this is the Baby Angel Geronimo editions of the KhoodeelaarTV television channel being broadcast on the internet, not on satellite, not on terrestrial, and not on cable platforms. This one is timed at 0740 hours GMT on Monday, the 17th of July 2023. Now, this is the topic that we have been discussing, and we are updating the description of Mr. Ismat Ali and Mr. Watir Ali as martyrs. They were murdered by the ISIS, but they were martyred. And accordingly, at the same time, simultaneously, we are upgrading the descriptions of Altab Ali as the martyr, Mr. Tosir Ali as the martyr, Mr. Ishaq Ali as the martyr. So Mr. Tosir Ali, Altab Ali, Mr. Ishaq Ali, Mr. Ismat Ali, and Mr. Watir Ali, all of them are martyrs. And we shall treat them as martyrs, and we shall refer to them as martyrs from now on. In the context of that reference, we have got a news item running in the main sort of news running orders on the Times, especially, and followed by the Guardian and the Telegraph in London, about the private investigator called Daniel Morgan, who was murdered in the car park of a pub called the Golden Lion in Sydenham in South London in 1987 as he was leaving the pub. And he was most probably likely to get into his car in the car park when he was set upon and was brutally murdered by an axe being embedded in the back of his head. So from 1987 until now, the London Metropolitan Police, which had the jurisdiction and the duty to investigate the murder of Daniel Morgan, has not taken action. And as the general overview presented in February this year by Louise Casey in the so-called Casey Review proves, the London Metropolitan Police has ceased to exist as a police organization. And we have said from years now, we've been saying that the policing has been abolished in the United Kingdom. Now, the reason why this item of Daniel Morgan's murder is in the news is because of the Times newspaper, which is today running on the front page. The Met meaning London Metropolitan Police. These people have a stupidity of confusing the Metropolitan Police with the Meteorological Office, which they also call Met. So they have to make up their mind and use the word Met only about the Metropolitan Police or about the Meteorological Office. So we shall refer to this as the London Police rather than Met. So the London Metropolitan Police paying out £2 million over corrupt murder investigation. The murder was not corrupt, it was a criminal event, of course, but the London Metropolitan Police, which is supposed to be investigating the murder, was corrupt. And the details include significantly that more than one London Metropolitan Police, quote, detective who was supposed to were supposed to be investigating Daniel Morgan's murder were sick-makingly criminally connected with the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch's now defunct News of the Screws, News of the World. So you cannot make it up. Because the London Metropolitan Police has abolished itself, the policing has been abolished, not the money, because the billions of pounds allocated for alleged policing, that money is still flowing into the pockets of these people who are masquerading as the police force. And the incumbent in the post of London mayor, who is supposed to be the head of the so called Metropolitan Police Authority, Sadiq Khan. I mean, when it comes to policing, Sadiq Khan doesn't exist. And as he doesn't exist, the item in the Times today, as followed by the Telegraph and the Guardian, really doesn't recognize Sadiq Khan's existence. So, what we shall be doing is to deal with this item as a substantial updater on the state of no policing in this country. And what policing there is a corrupt policing. Now, this item, corruption led car park killers evade justice, London Metropolitan Police Chief to admit. And it's a piece by Michael Gillard and Fiona Hamilton, who is described as the crime editor. Now, Gillard, I have to check on Gillard. It sounds that name sounds familiar in the context of crime and investigation. See if it is the same Gillard that is ringing the bell in my mind. Well, it is the same one, I think. It's Michael Gillard. Michael Sean Gillard is an investigative journalist who in 2013 was named Journalist of the Year and awarded investigation of the year. He writes for various media outlets, including the Bristol Cable, often with Alon Abiram, and has a profile at Macrack. Gillard is stated here as having been born in 1967. There is no place of birth, and his nationality is British. And his parents, Michael Gillard Sr., and his interests are stated as UK police corruption. And corruption, it is the same Gillard that has featured in other reporting. And as his background, they're saying that Gillard is the son. So this is a name. This Gillard, the surname, is known is a familiar name to me because Gillard was the name of Michael Gillard's father, who was an observer, investigative journalist. is a chip of the old block, says one ex colleague, who describes him as focused, secretive, and aspiring to the Woodward and Bernstein School of Journalism. Like his colleague, Laurie Flynn, Michael Gillard is a World in Action alumnus and worked on a documentary examining BP's Colombian security operations. Now, Laurie Flynn has not been heard of for a very long time, but Laurie Flynn used to be an editor of the Socialist Wonkers, the weekly Socialist Worker, and was, of course, correctly described as a former presenter on the World in Action program that was the Granada television program production in Manchester. On 28th of November 1998, The Independent reported on the Guardian's investigation into the connection, an award winning Carlton documentary about the drugs trade, which the newspaper claimed, that is, The Independent, was a fake. A hard news special on Channel 4 this evening corroborates central allegations against the connection, but questions the prominence the Guardian gave to the investigation and the way in which it was conducted. Hard News accuses the Guardian of adopting a high moral tone as it set itself up as a watchdog of television. But the program continues. The paper did not always live up to its own professed high standards. Chief among the Guardian's alleged sins appears to have been an aggressive interviewing technique deployed by the reporters Michael Sean Gillard and Laurie Flynn on the Connections producer Mark D. Beaufort. Because of security concerns about after exposing gangster David Hunt in the Sunday Times, Michael Gillard was advised not to attend the award ceremony. Instead, Gillard's friend and journalistic collaborator Laurie Flynn accepted the award on his behalf, dedicating it in part to the whistleblowers from inside the police and elsewhere who come forward to tell the truth in the public interest. On November the 1st, 1999, The Guardian published an article by Laurie Flynn and Michael Gillard on the safety of GM foods. The editor of one of Britain's leading medical journals, The Lancet, says he was threatened by a senior member of the Royal Society, the voice of the British science establishment, that his job would be at risk if he published controversial research questioning the safety of genetically modified foods. GM is genetically modified. Richard Horton declined to name the name man who telephoned him, but the Guardian has identified him as Peter Lunchman, the former vice president and biological secretary of the Royal Society and president of the Academy of Medical Sciences. The Guardian has been told that an influential group within the Royal Society has set up what appears to be a rebuttal unit to push a pro biotech line and counter opposing scientists and environmental groups. Corruption squad under fire. On the 4th of March 2000, The Guardian published an article by Laurie Flynn and Michael Gillard about Scotland Yard Headline: Corruption Squad Under Fire. Editor Alan Rushbridger soon came under intense pressure from the Metropolitan Police, culminating in a letter dated 2nd of August 2000 from Commander N.D. Heyman, and made the editorial decision not to publish further articles on the subject of UK police corruption. The two journalists refused to be silenced, however, and published their book Untouchables: Dirty Cops, Bent Justice, and Racism in Scotland Yard 4 years later. On 2nd of May 2009, this review of The Untouchables, the book 2004 edition, was published on Amazon. At £200 for a second-hand copy of this book, it's a national disgrace that this book hasn't been reprinted. It's inevitably, though, because this is the book that Scotland Yard does not want you to read. They have done all they can to sweep this under the carpet. After initially trying to ban it, everyone with any interest in law and order must read this book. It opens your eyes to the old dirty tricks that Scotland Yard has carried out, resulting in some very dodgy convictions of its own men, convictions that are currently being investigated by the Criminal Cases Review Commission and the Independent Police Complaints Commission. After it was reprinted in 2012, another review on Amazon on 5th of February 2013 reads as follows. As a serving police officer, books of this nature are always difficult to read. You always steel yourself, ready for a bit of cop bashing from an anti-police faction with a score to settle. Although this book launches a sustained attack upon the police, it is balanced, evidenced, and highlights deplorable behavior of named officers who form the untouchables. Honest police officers are identified and seen as victims. Efforts of whistleblowers are identified, and consequently, the book shows itself as balanced and objective. It shows clearly that the actions of corrupt officers impact dramatically on both the public and the honest police officers. This book makes essential reading for any person in a position of power as a reminder of the responsibility that comes with the power, full stop. The book is complex and difficult to follow at, at times due to the volume of persons involved. Nevertheless, a little perseverance and patience is all that is required to follow the plot. The book is a little out of date and does not include the updates with regard to Commander Ali Desai, which this book portrayed as a martyr of sorts, and yet he was found by a court to be guilty of perverting the course of justice in 2012. Now, that Ali Desai being a sort of martyr is a very significant reference indeed. Doesn't make this book any less credible. If anything, highlights further the complexities of police corruption. This is a captivating and compelling read and highly recommended investigative journalist at its very best. Now I'll read that again. Investigative journalism at its very best. And then there is the other one: Legacy, Gangsters, Corruption, and the London Olympics. Legacy, Gangsters, Corruption, and the London Olympics is scheduled for publication on the 10th of September 2019. Now, this is the book that was published, and this is something that we shall be looking at as an update in due course, not in this edition. So Michael Gillard is indeed the one that I thought it was, but it is the son of the Gillard that I first identified as the Gillard, the journalist, his father who was the Observer. Now, going back to the report that appears on page 3, is it page 3? Let's look at the actual pagination of today's Times, and it's not page 3, it's page 5. So if the camera can capture this one, I don't know whether if the camera cannot capture it straight away. It has to be bent, like the bent police. So this is the page 5 of the Times of Monday, the 17th of July. And this is the corruption let car park killers evade justice, Met Chief to admit. Now, this is the first paragraph of that piece by Michael Gillard. Remember, that is the name that we have been delving into. And Fiona Hamilton, crime editor. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner is expected to publicly admit that there was corruption, incompetence, and defensiveness in the police force's handling of their investigation into the murder of Daniel Morgan. The Times has learned. Mark Rowley personally attended a meeting last week with the family of Morgan, a private investigator murdered in 1987. After agreeing the largest payout in the Met's history, that is the London Metropolitan Police's history, in an attempt to draw an end to the case. What they are actually trying to do is not draw an end to the case, but to conceal, to hide, to continue to cover up the London Metropolitan Police's collusion, complicity in criminality. Mark Rowley and Barbara Gray, the assistant commissioner responsible for professionalism, apologized for extensive failings after the 2 million settlement was signed. So it has been signed. There are plans for a public apology this week. The Times understands that family members remain disappointed at Rowley's refusal to admit the Met is sustainably corrupt, that is, London Metropolitan Police is sustainably corrupt, even though an independent panel reached that conclusion in 2021. Despite 5 police investigations, no one has been brought to justice for the murder of Morgan, who was found with an axe embedded in his head in a car park in southeast London in 1987. The independent panel, which was led by Baroness O'Lone, and investigated the case for 8 years. Notice that 8 years they investigated. Said that multiple corruption links and other failings in the case were concealed or ignored by the London Metropolitan Police over 3 decades to protect the London Metropolitan Police's public image. Baroness O'Lone said that the report's findings of institutional corruption in the London Metropolitan Police were as significant as Sir William Macpherson's conclusion in 1999 that the Metropolitan Police was institutionally racist after the murder of Stephen Lawrence. Doreen and Neville Lawrence received a compensation payment of £320,000 in 2000 over the London Metropolitan Police's failures to properly investigate their son's murder. The Morgan payout is believed to dwarf other recent payouts to victims of London Metropolitan Police's incompetence, largely because of the scale of the failings in the case and the family's decades long fight against the cover up. The settlement also covers the family's legal costs. The London Metropolitan Police continues to reject Baroness O'Loan's findings of institutional corruption. Rowley has also refused to accept Baroness Casey of Blackstock's conclusion in a report published in March that the London Metropolitan Police is institutionally racist, sexist, and homophobic. Rowley institutional as it had been politicized. In its response to the Daniel Morgan panel last year, the London Metropolitan Police said, "We accept that corruption was a major factor in the failings of the first investigation. But we do not accept that we are institutionally corrupt, as has been suggested." It expressed deep regret that the case remained unsolved and that it was committed to getting justice for the was hampered by incompetence with failure to properly record evidence. Now we shall come to that in a minute because this is incomplete. Now this is so it says that the original Morgan investigation was hampered by incompetence with a failure to properly record evidence, secure the crime scene, take photographs, and avoid contamination of evidence. Documents in Morgan's office disappeared and have never been found. Key exhibits were destroyed. Subsequent inquiries did not adequately pursue leads nor examine allegations of corruption. Because Daniel Morgan, according to previous reports that are not being included in this particular version in the Times, was investigating police corruption. 4 men were cleared of the murder in 2011 when the case collapsed because of disclosure failures and concerns about the handling of a supergrass witness. They were later awarded damages totaling just over £500,000 for malicious prosecution. In May, the London Metropolitan Police apologized to Morgan's family. Again, when it discovered documents in a locked cabinet that should have been disclosed to the O'Loan inquiry. Alistair Morgan, 74, was the lead claimant in the civil claim along with his sister Jane, Morgan's widow, Iris, and her two children, Sarah and Daniel Jr., who were 5 and 3 respectively when the father was murdered outside the Golden Lion pub in Sydenham. The London Metropolitan Police declined to comment on this item. So, what this item says is that this man, Mark Rowley, is persisting in the denial. He's not making any different leadership at all. He is behaving just like Cressida Dick and the other commissioners, and he is perpetrating the same culture of denial. Now, we go back now to the issue of the unsolved murders of Mr. Ismat Ali and Mr. Watir Ali. Mr. Ismat Ali died almost immediately when they were attacked on the 9th of July 1989 in their flat in the Flower and Dean Walk behind Brick Lane. And Mr. Watir Ali was grievously injured, and I cannot check now because there is nothing accessible about the length of time he was in hospital before he too died. So those two martyrs have been ignored by the local Tower Hamlets Council. They've been ignored by the local MPs, whoever has been in. There have been several members of parliament in place since 1989. So Peter Shaw ignored, and the other MPs that have been in place ignored their martyrdom. And then Una King ignored them. And of course, George Galloway ignored them. So, what we have to do is to assess all the evidence as practical as much as the evidence that we can gather together and update them and reinforce the demand for justice to be done for Mr. Ismat Ali and Mr. Watir Ali. And contextually, we are planning to do the same about Mr. Ishaq Ali and Altab Ali and Mr. Tosir Ali. Because none of these martyrs has been done justice. They've been martyred. Mr. Ismat Ali, Mr. Tosir Ali was martyred in 1970. So that is 53 years ago. Mr. Ishaq Ali was martyred in July this month in 1978, 2 months after Altab Ali was murdered in May 1978. And then, of course, Mr. Ismat Ali and his relation, Watir Ali, were murdered, attacked in the murderous attack on them in July 1989. Now, in the period, say, let's say, starting from 53 years ago, the composition, the demography, and the social structure within what goes for Bangladesh, that is Bangladesh in terms of origin, the Bangladesh origin community in the UK, many things have happened. And many people have made all kinds of claims in relation to their role in representing the community. For example, this book by Olog বিশ্বাস, who was the Phantom, writer of the Phantom book, allegedly about the events of 1978. This is one of dozens of so called books that have been written by individuals with absolutely no knowledge of the Bangladeshi community in Brick Lane in the east end of London in Tower Hamlets. And the British media somehow has been hoodwinked, misled into giving them mentions. Now, these individuals who have written the so called books, all of them, and I assert this on the record, all of these people have written the so called books out of intention to exploit the events for their own benefit. Now, I am the one who started the campaign for justice for Altawali, and it is on the record. It's not something I'm just making up after the event. I'm the one who brought worldwide attention on the record by going on UK national television. That happened for the first time. And I did that on the very spot. The statement that I made was recorded by Janet Street Porter for the London Weekend Television, which is part of the ITV networks in the Altawali Park, what is now Altawali Park, the spot. And the spot where I stood was the spot that on Saturday, the 15th of July, 1989, the people who had organized the rally apparently demanding justice for Mr. Ismat Ali at that time, because Mr. Watir Ali had not yet succumbed to the attack, but Mr. Ismat Ali had died. That is the spot where I stood, and Janet Street Porter recorded that, and they broadcast it on the Sunday immediately after the Sunday that followed immediately after the recording of my statement. So therefore, I know what the campaign was about and what was motivating. Because, for example, some of the so called left wing British media outlets tried to give credit to other individuals for making comments about the then at that stage murder of Altawali. But they were wrong because they were fed the false information by racists like Dan Jones. Dan Jones is a racist, but he's been given credit. For years, he has been given credit for allegedly supporting our community. He did no such thing. Dan Jones is a racist, ignorant racist, and has got anti Bangladeshi, anti Muslim bias. And because of that, I have always found his surfacing in any shape or form in the context of any reference to the racist murdering and the racist martyring Altabali unacceptable. And the behavior, Dan Jones's behavior over the decades since the martyrdom of Altabali is evidence of Dan Jones being a racist, an anti Muslim, and a hostile individual. Now, those people who have been also mentioned along with Dan Jones by the various outlets have no idea, they have not shown the capacity or the understanding about the racism in this country. And that has meant that they have willingly, willingly put themselves forward for pictures and sometimes quotations as being part of the opposition to racism that they want to show was the opposition in defense of the Bangladeshi community, because Altawali was the martyr who belongs to the Bangladeshi community. These individuals included, amazingly, included one of the recorded victims, targets of racism, called Abdul Salik. Now, Abdul Salik came to me. I didn't know him. I was walking in the new road, and as I was in the middle of the road in the street, I felt somebody touch me on the back. And looked back, and I saw it was a man that I didn't know. So I said, "Why are you stopping me?" So he immediately started to put on a teary kind of persona. And this happened just at the corner of New Road and the street that goes to the back of the East London Mosque. So there is a kind of cafe there. And I think we went into the cafe in order to stop, not interrupt people walking by. So I wanted to know why he stopped me. So I asked him what his name was, and he said his name. And then I said, "Why did you stop me?" Now, the reason why Abdul Salik stopped me and started crying was because he was at that time under remember, this was 1977. So this was the period when James Callaghan was the prime minister, the year after Harold Wilson had resigned and had been succeeded by James Callaghan. So Abdul Salik told me that he was an illegal immigrant and he had come to the UK by using somebody else's passport. He told me the date was 1970. Now, I didn't know him, as I said. So I said, "Why did you stop me? Because I don't know you. So why did you stop me?" Now, he didn't actually admit it. But the real reason why he stopped me, Abdul Salik was absolutely, throughout his life, he was a liar. And I'll update on his lying and his dishonesty. What he did was he was actually following the main news, and I had been in the main news. In fact, I had fought the then Home Secretary, Marlin Rees, and I had successfully stopped his racist attack on me. So I had been in the news, and Abdul Salik was the first one to know the importance of somebody being in the news in the way that I had been. So he didn't admit it, but that is what prompted him to stop me, because he had been obviously stalking me. Since I was featured in the national news in the United Kingdom, not long before he stopped me, he was obviously stalking me, which I didn't know. So he gave me the sob story saying that Peter Shaw, who was the member of parliament at the time for the constituency, had betrayed him, that is Abdul Salik. I said, "How did Peter Shaw betray you?" And Abdul Salik gave a sob story, tearfully saying that I had I gave my passport to him, the passport that he had used, whatever the passport, I didn't see it. So he said, I gave my passport to him to look at and help me because he, that is Abdul Salik, was under a deportation order at that time. When he went to the local MP, which is Peter Shaw, and he said that is Abdul Salik because I was not there. The event that he described, I was only hearing his version. So he said that Peter Shaw asked me to leave my passport with him. And when I left my passport with him, instead of acting to help me, Peter Shaw sent it to the Home Office. And because it was an issue about a dodgy immigration kind of affair, the Home Office reinforced or made a stronger order against Abdul Salik, demanding that he should be deported, he should leave the country. So that is where they started the tearful journey of Abdul Salik began. Now that happened in 1977, and it took 3 years of campaign. 3 years of campaign, and throughout the 3 years, it was me keeping my focus on the role whereabouts of Peter Shaw. So much so that at the crucial meeting that was held in Dan Jones's flat or house or address in the Cable Street, where I would say about a dozen or so Bangladeshi young people were present with me. Dan Jones claimed at the meeting, because the conversation was between me on behalf of Abdul Salik and Dan Jones on behalf of Peter Shaw and the Home Office, whatever. And Dan Jones said that I said to Dan Jones that, look, it's Peter Shaw that started the whole thing. And I articulated a detailed political statement. I said that Abdul Salik, I don't know him, but he is a member of the ordinary community, the Bangladeshi community, and he approached me. Now, I would support him on the principle that he is a member of the Bangladeshi community, even though I don't know him or I didn't know him until he approached me from behind, etc., etc. So I said to Dan Jones, look, it's Peter Shaw, according to Abdul Salik's statement to me, it's Peter Shaw who has put extra pressure on Abdul Salik, and he is now under threat of deportation. So, what are you going to do? Now, during that discussion in the evening, that was happening in the at the address of Dan Jones in the evening, one of the things that Dan Jones had done before this segment of the conversation happened, he was talking to Paul Beasley. Now, Paul Beasley was at the time the Tower Hamlets Council Labour Party, Labour Group leader. And I'll come to that behavior and the role of Paul Beasley. Remember, this was happening the year before Altawali was martyred. But I was the organizer of the campaign against racists in Tower Hamlets, against the Bangladeshi community. Now, so Dan Jones had a conversation to the effect with Paul Paul Beasley that he and Beasley had agreed that Abdul Salik should be sent to Germany. Instead of being deported back to Bangladesh, Abdul Salik should be sent to Germany as an interim kind of way so that he could stay in Germany while they, that is, Peter Shaw, Peter Shaw's colleagues, let's say, Dan Jones and Paul Beasley, fiddled whatever they said they would be doing. So at that point, when we came to me and Dan Jones having the conversation, remember the conversation was very heated. Dan Jones was unable to answer my questions, and I was asking various questions about Peter Shaw. And the most crucial thing that Dan Jones said in that conversation was that, as far as he was concerned, he could not get hold of Peter Shaw because Peter Shaw was away from London. Can you imagine this? Anyone who has been watching my programs should know this. Now, I am an avid student of the broadcast media, the print media, etc., etc. Now, during that day, earlier on that day, I had heard a broadcast which included a reference to Peter Shaw being, guess what, in London. So I told Dan Jones that, listen, you are lying. You are lying, and you should withdraw that lie and call Peter Shaw the liar and do the thing that is necessary so that Abdul Salik is not having to go to Germany or anywhere else. That Abdul Salik stays in the East End of London with the Bangladeshi community, where he is a member of the community. It doesn't matter where he comes from in Silot. I don't care. He is a Bangladeshi person, and I'm here to defend his rights, and I'm asking you to do the right thing. And I told John Danjos in front of these other people, I said, if you don't do what I'm asking in reasonable way to do, then there will be what is called, I didn't use the phrase, but what could be called the mother of all protests in East London. I said, I'll lead the campaign and I shall make you account for your behavior. So I'm asking you to help resolve this issue and let Abdul Salik stay in the United Kingdom. Doesn't matter whether he's an illegal immigrant or not. Remember, I'm not exonerating Abdul Salik for any breaches of the law or violating the law. The point is different. So after I had finished, Dan Jones found his telephone and he was able to call Peter Shaw on the telephone. And surprise, surprise, whereas he had said earlier that Peter Shaw was out of London, he got hold of Peter Shaw, or he got hold of the confirmation to the effect that Peter Shaw was in London. I said, go ahead and tell him to help Abdul Salik. Now, what happened afterwards is, of course, now history. After that meeting with Dan Jones in his house, Abdul Salik was not going to be deported because I had made it clear that there would be the mother of all campaigns to keep Abdul Salik in London, in the United Kingdom, and he would not be deported. Now, that can be elaborated on, and there are many other things because in the 3 years that followed after Abdul Salik tapped me on the back in the street off New Road, Abdul Salik approached literally literally dozens of people, if not more, and got them to write, quote, letter describing him as a member of the community and begging the Home Office to let him stay. Those letters, those correspondence, and those documents are there. They exist. So what happens? Abdul Salik gets to stay in the country, and then he begins the process of exploiting his connection with Dan Jones. Remember what I did to Dan Jones. I completely demoralized him morally, ethically. But without telling me, Abdul Salik creates a friendship with Dan Jones and takes him to Bangladesh with him on a travel, and then begins to get his family, his mother, his wife, his children over. That was not any of the items that he discussed with me when he was crying about stopping his deportation. I don't mind when he brought his mother, his younger brother, Rolech, his wife, Hasna, and his three children. But he didn't have the courtesy, he didn't have the sense, he didn't have anything to say thank you, not in any way, shape, or form. The only thing he did was to get me to speak or read a poem at a meeting that he held after he got the clearance to stay in the country. But what I found later, much later, was that he was saying that Dan Jones was his best friend, that Peter Shaw was his best friend. Where do you begin to describe this? The Peter Shaw was the one who was getting him deported, and Dan Jones was involved in half deporting him, if not fully deporting him. So we shall be talking more about Abdul Salik and how he didn't understand the morality or the ethics or the honesty about migration. What I did for Abdul Salik, I did out of my own morality and my ethics. I didn't do it in order to benefit from him, and I haven't. But Abdul Salik betrayed the one promise that he made to me, the one promise that I had asked him to make at the time, at the beginning of his kind of contact with me, following that time when he was stalking me. I said, Abdul Salik, I don't want you to give me any material benefit or anything. You are asking me to help you, and I shall do my necessary best in order to help you if you are legitimate in seeking the help. Give me a promise. And he said, what shall I promise? I said, don't tell lies and don't betray the Bangladeshi community. Now, I'm not the only one saying it. If anyone goes around the people in Brick Lane in East London talking about what Abdul Salik was like after he got to stay in the country, people will say that Abdul Salik was ungrateful to every single person that he knew, and that Abdul Salik lied, and Abdul Salik lied, And Abdul Salik lied. And he didn't care how much damage he did to the community, how much damage he did to the other people. He was disrespectful, he was an ingrate, and he claimed all kinds of things, including the picture that he has got on his Facebook account with him standing next to Peter Shaw is a disgrace beyond condemnation. There is no picture of the dozens of people he cried and wept and got help to help him. No Bangladeshi person features in Abdul Salik's gratitude on the Facebook about his stay in this country. And it's endless. It is endless. So I am doing what I'm doing for the martyrs, Mr. Ismat Ali, Mr. Watir Ali, Mr. Ishaq Ali, Mr. Tosir Ali, and of course for Altab Ali, for my principles, for justice for Mr. Ismat Ali, for justice for Mr. Watir Ali, for Mr. Ishaq Ali, and Mr. Tosir Ali. I shall be continuing on all these issues and campaigns for the justice for Mr. Ismat Ali, Watir Ali, Mr. Ishaq Ali, Mr. Tosir Ali. And the principle that I want to reinforce is the principle universal justice and fairness. Whatever the various sequence of events that led to Mr. Ismat Ali being murdered and Mr. Watir Ali being grievous bodily harmed, I don't know any of those events because I didn't know them. But they shouldn't have been attacked and they shouldn't have been killed. And murdering somebody or attacking them in that way is completely wrong in my faith and in any faith. And the truth, of course, will be all the truth that we are doing in this world will be, of course, become available for us on the day of judgment, as it says in the Holy Quran, where I have been inspired by the saying in the Holy Quran that truth has arrived and falsehood has disappeared. For indeed, falsehood shall perish, disappear. Innal batila kana zahuka. And anyone who denies the truth about somebody's character, somebody's behavior, can deny that under the influence of shaitan. But there are two witnesses on both our shoulders. One shoulder, the record is for our good deeds, and the other shoulder, the record is for our bad deeds in this world, in this life. So if Abdul Salik lied, he could have lied in this world, but the lies that he has perpetrated will catch up with him. Anyone else does the same will do that. As I say, my name was decided at a day-long conference of scholars. My father organized a conference of scholars to take part in day-long event, discussing what name to choose for me. So the name they decided I should have is Zahir. Zahir is the one who is active, who pronounces, who advocates, who publishes. And the core of the name, which is Haq, is the truth. So the two together, one who publishes, discloses the truth. Now that was done, I don't know how old I was, but that was done when they made the decision. That is when I was made aware of the name and the meaning. And I was aware, I was conscious of the meaning that they were explaining about my name. And what happened, since I understood that immediately, I made myself a promise that I shall do only one thing, which is to tell the truth. Now, to my knowledge, I have done that ever since then, and I shall continue doing the same. So when I help somebody or when I help somebody's case, they may not realize that, but I'm doing this because of that. That the purpose of my being on this earth is to tell the truth. So, this is the bit of the Surah Al Isra. This is the bit. So it says, and I'm transliterating, of course. I mean, in front of me is the words Waqul Ja al Haqqu. Remember, that is the Haqq. Waqul Ja al Haqqu wa Zahaq al Batil. Innal Batila kana Zahuqa. Waqul Ja al Haqqu. Truth has arrived. Wa Zahaq al Batil. And the falsehood has disappeared, perished. Innal, that is definitely. In, innal batila kana zahuka. So if I help somebody tell the truth, or if I help somebody argue for justice anywhere, I'm doing that for that reason. Okay? So if Abdul Salik thought that he had cheated me, he had used me, and then he became friends with the Satans that tried to deport him, he could not be more wrong. وَقُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. There are many predictions. There are many predictions that refer to the groups, various groups of, let's say, Muslim or scholars. Now, So, what happened with Paul Beasley? I'm going to talk about Paul Beasley. Now, Paul Beasley in 1978 was the leader of the Tower Council. All right. And in 1978, people like Abdul Salik didn't exist. He didn't have any standing, he didn't have any locus. In fact, Abdul Salik in 1978 was crying. Every time he would see me, he would cry and he would weep because he wanted the news that he was not going to be deported. And he did that to me and he did that to other people that I know. And there were no campaigners in 1978 against racism, not in the way that I was doing this. So Altab Ali was murdered in May 1978, and this was July. There was a meeting as one of the consequences of the response to the racist martyrdom of Altab Ali was various meetings that were taking place. And one meeting that took place was at the Montefiore Center. On the first floor of Montefiore Center, there was a meeting that was attended by Paul Beasley, of course, and there were a number of people from the Commission for Racial Equality, the CRE. Now, as the people who were present there would know, I made the statement that will remain forever unprecedented. Nobody else has made that statement that I made in July 1978. And I did this. I pointed at Paul Beasley and I said, this racist is responsible for the racist attacks. And went on. Now, anyone who knew Paul Beasley, I mean, he would put on a red color on his face when he was under pressure. And Paul Beasley was putting on a red color on his skin. And I said, this racist is responsible. Now, that kind of statement had never been made by anyone, any Asian, any African, anywhere in Tower Hamlets or anywhere. And the people were absolutely stunned. I said, we have to resolve this racism and stop him being a racist. Now, imagine when Paul Beasley then became friends with a number of Bangladeshi youth. Now, these youth didn't exist, not as representatives of the community, but immediately after he got identified by me as the racist, Paul Beasley immediately found a way of inventing some Bangladeshi youth. Now, those youth, I know them, but I'm not naming them in this broadcast. But those youth were so stupid. They must have come from a background where they had not heard of affairs to do with the state. Now, I grew up in a home, in a house where the adult people were only discussing affairs of the state. So there is a difference of millions of years between me and those youth. Because I had called him the devil, the racist, and what they were doing, they started circulating the tales about how the council leader, Paul Beasley, was inviting them and taking them to trips. Now, how do you begin to compare these two tendencies? So, when somebody says that they are defending the community, you have to understand what they understand about defense. These ones were not capable of understanding the defense of the community then, and in the years that have followed, they don't understand the defense of the community even now. Which is why a proven liar like Lutfur Rahman has been put in place as the incumbent as the mayor at the expense of the community. Now he disgraced the whole community. A proven liar like Paula Monzila Uddin is a thief. She's in the House of Peers. Now where do you condemn these people? And where can she, Paula Monzila Uddin, be found defending the rights of martyrs like Mr. Ismat Ali, martyrs like Mr. Watir Ali, martyrs like Mr. Ishaq Ali, martyrs like Mr. Tosir Ali, to demand justice for them? Because the only reason why Paula Monzila Uddin was placed in the House of Peers was because she was a, quote, ethnic minority. What a disgrace! She doesn't know anyone in the community other than as a fodder, as a kind of decoration, so that she could say to her masters and mistresses in the racist community that these are her people. They are not. She did not consult us when she stole the money. She did not consult us when she told the lies about her, where her home was. And the housing cooperative, the management personnel who colluded with Paula Monzila Uddin's lying and her theft, they committed subsidiary crimes after the event, after her thefts, and that to this day they have remained silent about why they remained silent and why they didn't expel her from the list of their membership after it became clear that she had stolen public money. So, innal batila kana zahuka. She stole the money and she committed thefts. And surprise, surprise, it becomes known. Lutfur Rahman committed dozens, hundreds of lies while he was in the post for the first term from October 2010 until he was kicked out by the election commissioner Richard Morey. And Lutfur Rahman thought that he was being clever. He would not be caught, but he was caught. He was caught by two of the liars that he got into the hearing to give him lying certificates. One was Paula Monzila Uddin and the other was Shamsul Haq. Innal batila kana zahuka. Detained by the Iranian regime for 6 years, is part of the diplomatic propaganda kind of agenda narrative that is intended to undermine the objectively verifiable kind of claims and rights of the regimes that are controlled by Muslims. So we shall be talking more about Palauddin and Shamsul Haq in the context of the overdue upholding of the justice for these martyrs and their silence. Lutfur Rahman is silent about Mr. Ismat Ali, Mr. Watir Ali, Mr. Ishaq Ali, Mr. Tasir Ali, as he is silent about Altaf Ali. And the other holders in the name of the community intahamers, the Bangladeshis, for example, the members of parliament, they are silent as well. The councillors who got the votes of the Bangladeshi voters, because if they didn't get the votes of the Bangladeshi voters, they would not ever get elected to the posts in the council that they got elected to. So once they got the elected kind of procedure out of the way, that's it. They don't know the community until the next time, 3-4 years later, when they begin to remember. I mean, for 4 years they didn't, or 3 good years they didn't remember the community. But when it comes election time, they begin to remember. The memory comes back. This is why these two angels on the right shoulder and the left shoulder are recording everything for this world and for the day of judgment. One of the beneficiaries of the opportunity that the racist Paul Beasley gave in order to avoid being condemned by me as the racist that I was able to identify him as, Paul Beasley, according to accounts, hired helicopters and took these Bangladeshi youth on helicopter trips. For heaven's sake, they were completely, absolutely oozing with gratitude for Paul Beasley. Of course, they didn't know me. But at the heart of the whole thing, I was the main target, so that they could, in my absence, say all kinds of things. Well, they can fantasize. They cannot say that I'm a liar. They cannot say that I'm a betrayer of the community. I am the one at the forefront. I am the one at the forefront. And I don't depend on them, never have done. So when Lutfur Rahman told lies over the 5 years, from October 2010 until the 23rd of April 2015, when he was kicked out by Richard Morey, Lutfur Rahman was lying. I knew that he was lying. He knew that he was lying. But he hoped that I would not spill the bean, and I didn't. What happened? There was an intervention as promised in the Holy Quran. And it was an intervention that was not expected by him. The restaurant owner and a known notorious liar, Ajmal Hussain, who stole money from the Swedish and he escaped to the UK, he came forward to organize the petition against Lutfur Rahman. This is not something that I could have organized. I would not want that kind of thing. I did not need to do that. But I believe in God and believe in the promise. Innal batila kana zahuqa. And when the evidence was being presented by Palauddin and Shamsul Haq, allegedly to certify Lutfur Rahman as an honest person, innocent person, their records spoke volumes and fell them. Fell is a verb transitive. Fell them. They were put on the ground. They were crushed in the hearing because Shamsul Haq had denied at one stage in the proceedings when he appeared to give the evidence, denying that he had told the people in the mosque, the Musallis, to vote for Lutfur Rahman. He denied that first time. And then the other side, the side in the hearing representing the petitioners, asked him, was he sure? And Shamsul Haq said, you are sure. And that side again said that, but you are on the record as having done that. You are on the video or on the sound. I didn't attend that. I'm speaking on behalf of on the basis of transcripts that I have read afterwards. I didn't go into the hearing. So when this was put to him, Shamsul Haq, that you did indeed tell the people to vote for Lutfur Rahman on religious, spiritual ground. And Shamsul Haq, anyone who knows him, he's a man with a very white beard, and any of the innocent people looking at him would be forgiven for thinking that here is an honest man, a God-fearing man. But Shamsul Haq was a liar. He said, Shamsul Haq, on the second time that this evidence was put to him, he said, if I am on the record, either video or audio, then I must have told the people that they should vote for Lutfur Rahman on spiritual or religious ground. Now, this Shamsul Haq, he comes from an area not far from where I was born and grew up. And if he went to the madrasa or he had education, schooling in the Holy Quran, he should have come across the Surah Al-Isra. Innal batila kana zahuqa. So why did he ignore the Holy Quran? And why did he lie? He said, if I am on the record as having told the people to vote for Lutfur Rahman on the ground of religion or spirituality, then I must have done. So he was prepared to submit to interrogators that were not necessarily adherents of the teachings of the Holy Quran. But he was doing that in defiance of the requirements of the kalima, the oath. Then it came the turn of Paula Monzila-Uddin, and she was probably embarked on making a long statement explaining or stating how, in her view, Lutfur Rahman was honest and truthful individual. Unfortunately for Paula Monzila-Uddin, she was interrupted by the side of the petitioners. And they said to her, "But you have stolen money. You stole money by false pretense and saying that your home is somewhere where it is not." Now she was felled as well. So these are the people that Lutfur Rahman took to the court to give him certificate. And for the whole period preceding that, 29th of October when I spoke to him, 29th of October Friday, 29th of October 2010, on the Juma, after the Juma prayers in Brick Lane, I told Lutfur Rahman to listen to me and to listen to me for the sake of the Bangladeshi community, and he should not be ignoring what I am saying. That was Friday, the 29th of October 2010. Now, Lutfur Rahman promised 6 or 7 times in the course of a minute or so that he would meet me, sit down with me, and listen to me. After, he said, getting settled down, because that was the week after the election, so called election to the post of mayor at the expense of Tower Hamlets. So Lutfur Rahman said that I would sit down. Now that was 2010. This is the calendar year 2023. 13 calendar years later, I'm saying this, and Lutfur Rahman did not keep that promise. Instead, he got involved with any number of criminals, fraudsters, and thugs to abuse the position of elected mayor and transacted various items of business corruptly. Now, the full details of those transactions cannot be put in one particular document, but the report by the Price Waterhouse Coopers, the audit company that the then Secretary of State for Communities, Eric Pickles, commissioned, their report into Tower Hamlets Council gives a representative summary of the corruption, misuse of office, and fraud and dishonesty that Lutfur Rahman engaged in. Innal batila kana zahuqa. While Lutfur Rahman was under the impression that he had been clever in telling me a lie and he would not be held to account, little did he realize that I didn't need him to be personally accountable to me. I never did. I never do. I need him to be truthful, full stop. I need him to be honest, full stop. Not to do me a favor, but to stop lying. Lying to me, lying to anybody else. Innal batila kana zahuqa. Indeed, falsehood shall perish. What did you do? The PwC report Now, it's called the report is headed on the government website called the Best Value Inspection of London Borough of Tower Hamlets. Okay. So it's headed Independent Report, Best Value Inspection of London Borough of Tower Hamlets. This document is a report of an inspection carried out by PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP, also known as PwC, of the governance of Tower Hamlets Council. All right. And it was published on the 4th of November 2014. At that time, on that date, on the 4th of November 2014, by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. And in that report, they give enough representation of the various instances of misrepresentations and lying and concealment perpetrated by Lutfur Rahman. Again, innal batila kana zahuka. People don't understand that only because it's not a society or a country that adheres to the Islamic teachings generally. People don't understand that it doesn't have to be. The promises of God, innal batila kana zahuka, they come regardless of whether these people are prepared or not. So we shall be talking about all of these, and we shall be continuing the campaign for justice for both Mr. Ismat Ali and Mr. Watir Ali, Mr. Ishaq Ali, Mr. Tosir Ali, and of course adding to the campaign for justice, demanding for justice for Altab Ali in due course. This particular broadcast has been 1 hour 38 minutes. So we shall be ending this one at 09:20 hours GMT on Monday, the